Constantine did not walk into the Council of Nicaea as a believer. He walked in as an emperor who had a problem to solve. The problem was not theological. Constantine had very little personal interest in whether Christ was begotten or made, whether the Son was equal to the Father, or whether the Holy Spirit proceeded from one source or two. These were not questions that kept him awake at night. What kept him awake at night was an empire coming apart at the seams. By the early 300s, the Roman Empire was a civilization in crisis. It had already split and reunified multiple times. Rival emperors had fought each other for control. Provinces were restless. The economy was unstable. The military was stretched thin across borders that never stopped requiring attention. And now, the one new force in the empire that had demonstrated real cohesive power, Christianity, was tearing itself apart over a question that most Romans could not even properly pronounce. The question was the nature of Jesus Christ. A priest in Alexandria named Arius had been teaching that the Son of God, while divine, was not co-eternal with the Father. That there was a time when the Son did not exist. That the Father was supreme and the Son was a created being, exalted beyond all others, but still created, subordinate. This position had spread. It had followers across the Eastern Empire. It had bishops, theologians, and congregations willing to die defending it. It also had fierce opponents. The Bishop Alexander of Alexandria and his young assistant Athanasius insisted that the Son was fully equal to the Father. Same substance, same eternity, same divinity. To compromise on this was not a theological adjustment. It was the destruction of the faith itself. Both sides were certain. Both sides were loud. And both sides were spreading their fight across the very administrative structures that Constantine needed to function smoothly. So Constantine called a council. He summoned bishops from across the empire to the city of Nicaea, in what is now northwestern Turkey. He paid for their travel, he housed them, he fed them, he sat at the head of the room, and then he made sure the outcome went the way he needed it to go. This is the part of the story that the official version tends to soften. Constantine is often portrayed as a pious chairman, humbly facilitating the debate of holy men and accepting whatever conclusion the Spirit provided. That portrait is not supported by the evidence. Constantine had theological opinions, he had political preferences, and he had the power to enforce them. The council concluded with the adoption of the Nicene Creed, a statement of faith that declared the Son to be of the same substance as the Father, equal, eternal, co-divine. The Arian position was condemned as heresy. Arius was exiled. Bishops who refused to sign were removed. The Church had spoken, or more precisely, the Emperor had spoken, and the Church had been organized to reflect it. What is remarkable is not that Constantine influenced the outcome. It is why he influenced it in the direction he did. The theological reasoning that favored the Nicene position was not Constantine's primary concern. What mattered was unity. A standardized, enforceable statement of Christian belief was infinitely more useful to an emperor than an ongoing theological civil war. The specific content of the creed mattered less than the fact that there was a creed at all, one document binding across the empire, enforced by the full weight of Roman authority. For Constantine, theological unity was administrative infrastructure, but the story does not end with a unified creed and a satisfied emperor, because almost immediately after Nicaea, Constantine changed his position. Arius was rehabilitated. Athanasius, the fierce defender of Nicene orthodoxy, who had become the most prominent voice for the council's conclusions, was exiled. Not once, not twice, but 5 times under multiple emperors. The phrase that attached to him across history was not a compliment at first, Athanasius against the world, but it became one, because he kept returning, he kept insisting. He refused to let the theological question become permanently subordinated to the political one. And this is the tension that the Council of Nicaea created, but did not resolve. It is the tension between a faith that claims to answer to a higher authority than any emperor, and an institution that has been restructured to serve imperial needs. It is the tension between what the creed said and what the creed was for. The Christianity that emerged from Nicaea was more powerful, more organized, and more capable of lasting impact than the Christianity that entered it. The creed that was produced there is still recited in Catholic and Orthodox and many Protestant churches every single Sunday across the world. The theological position that Constantine's council enforced, that the Son and the Father are of the same substance, is considered the bedrock of Christian orthodoxy to this day. But the process that produced it was not a moment of pure spiritual discernment. It was a negotiation. It was a power exercise. It was an emperor using the tools of Roman administration to bring order to a religious controversy, because disorder was expensive and unity was useful. What the council left behind was not just a creed. It was a template, a demonstration that Christian theology could be shaped by the rooms where powerful people gathered to decide what other people would believe. That template got used again. At Constantinople, at Ephesus, at Chalcedon, at every subsequent council where emperors and bishops sat together and determined the official shape of Christian truth. The councils produced real theology, real belief, real faith that real people lived and died holding on to. That is not nothing. That is not a small thing. But the architecture of those councils, the mechanism by which Christian doctrine became official doctrine, that architecture was Roman. It was political. It was built to last, and it did. Nicaea did not settle the question of who Christ was. It settled the question of who got to decide. Subscribe to Sacred Mysteries. The rooms where history was made are still standing. We are still reading the minutes.